What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Freedom to Flourish podcast. My name is Dr. Tim Augustiniak. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Joel Miller, and we've got a good episode for you today. The highlight for today, we have it just titled Menopause right now, but really the main goal of today's episode is to talk about menopause and how adrenal function or dysfunction can make that either better or worse. So it's going to be a great episode today. And we were chatting before we even started this episode, and we just talked about, what do you always see with patients who are struggling with menopause? And we both, right off the bat, were like, okay, well, adrenal dysfunction leading to poor sex hormone production following cessation of production via the ovaries. So whenever you go through menopause, what happens is your body naturally stops producing as much follicle stimulating hormone. And what that does is it stimulates your ovaries to produce estrogens. And so there are three possible locations for the body to produce estrogen. Of course, this is for women. Your ovaries, your fat cells, and your adrenals. And so if your adrenals are dysfunctional and your ovaries stop, your fat cells are not going to produce enough. So anyway, that's kind of the goal for today, is to talk about how you can identify what's going on, how you can heal your adrenals, how to identify if you have an adrenal problem, and just how to get through this process that happens to every woman a bit more smoothly. So hopefully going to be a good one today. But Dr. Joel, how are things going this morning?
Hey, Dr. Tim. Things are going well, super busy as always, but we always have time for the podcast. You make time for things that are important, so I'm excited. Yeah, with menopause, I think the number one thing that I probably run into is a lack of education and lack of knowledge. So I want this episode to be partly that, as far as like, what is it, what's actually happening here? And then once you kind of have that foundation, then you can start to understand what you can do to overall increase your quality of life. A lot of women kind of, as they start aging, they get into their upper 40s, their 50s, their 60s, and so forth. They start noticing their mood is a little bit off. They're not as happy. Maybe they're more irritable. They notice that their energy is less. They notice they just in general don't feel good. They have more inflammation. They're gaining more weight. All these different things that are related to hormones. And again, doctors are not really educating them on what's happening. So I love how you just jump right in, Dr. Tim. So when it comes to menopause, the way that I generally explain it to people is, yes, your ovaries throughout life are producing the majority of your hormones. And most women don't actually realize this, but your ovaries are producing mainly testosterone that gets converted into estrogen, which is really interesting, and things like that. But as your ovaries reduce in overall hormone production, there's the two other kind of places that produce estrogen in the body. And you mentioned it, the adrenal glands, and then the adipose or fat tissue. And from what I've seen, it's kind of my suspicion / theory that that a lot of women, as they kind of hit menopause, since the adrenal glands struggle so much due to just chronic stress and their system being worn down over time, they'll actually notice that their body increases weight and they gain weight because their body is saying, hey, we need to produce these estrogen hormones, and we're going to do that by adding on fat tissue and try to support the body that way. So I kind of see that as a compensation mechanism at times, which is really interesting. Nonetheless, with estrogen levels, as your ovaries drop down in production, your overall hormone level is going to drop down. But what I see, Dr. Tim, as the main issue is that, the adrenal glands are producing, a minority, but still an important part of our hormones for women. And when the ovaries really drop down, the adrenal glands need to be strong so they can produce the hormones that they need to produce. So again, overall hormone production is going to decrease, but the adrenal glands should still be producing hormones. But it's when the adrenal glands are struggling that even that level of hormone drops down. And now women are really feeling the effects. So just a quick side note for women that are listening to this. we did an episode on adrenal fatigue and so forth. I would definitely recommend checking that out because we're going to talk about. You'll see a lot of similarities from this episode and that one, but that one may be a bit more focused and in depth on the adrenals. But we'll definitely get into it quite a bit today. So, Dr. Tim, where does this put us at now? Should we kind of jump into talking about the adrenal glands and how important that is, and just kind of talking about the importance there of really what they do, what wears them down, and how we can strengthen them? Or is there another kind of direction you wanted to go here?
Well, I was thinking we could start with this. Let's talk about how menopause kicks off, how you identify that you're going through it, both through signs, symptoms, as well as labs that you can look at, but then also get into that is really what kind of causes that whole spiral in regards to the typical menopause symptoms that, all the ladies like to talk about: flashes, mood swings, weight gain, all that stuff. Let's talk about what really leads to that, because in my opinion, you really shouldn't have those symptoms that much. So the way that I like to describe that is your body basically reduces its resting state, its happy place of estrogens. And so basically overnight, your body can flip from being very happy with the estrogens that you have to being very upset with it, and it's seeing it as an estrogen dominant state. And so hot flashes, mood swings, weight gain, all of those are estrogen dominant symptoms.
Yep.
And so detoxification is also a very, very necessary thing. So, but anyway, let's get into really what menopause is. So as you age, well, as women age, not as men age, but as women age, when you're born, you have a specific number of eggs that your ovaries contain. As every single period comes by, you will ovulate, and from there, you will prepare an egg for fertilization to then hopefully, or depending on where you're at in life, not get pregnant. But as far as your body's concerned, hopefully get pregnant. The goal is reproduction. That's why all that stuff exists. But as you age, the number of eggs will run out, and at some point, they're just completely gone. Once you get to that state, and your count is very, very, very low, your body starts to get to the point where, like, well, okay, if we don't have any eggs around, and we are past prime age to reproduce, let's start to decrease the amount of hormone that is required to, one, start your period, start ovulation, get all that stuff going. And then from there, stop all the bleeding that comes with shedding the endometrial lining, and all that stuff. So the way that the body does that is it basically just quits producing follicle stimulating hormone as much. And so it greatly reduces. And then from there, that hormone is what the pituitary gland produces to then tell the ovaries, let's make and convert more hormone to estrogens. When that's the case, that's where you go from basically overnight, it's not really overnight, but, within a couple weeks to a couple months, your body being very happy with the estrogens that you have to being very upset with it if you don't detoxify it fast enough. So you go from needing, say, 1,000 estrogens to like 2. And that's what your body is happy with. That's really, if you look at a Dutch test, I forget what the actual units are on it, but it's got basically like a sliding scale of estrogens. And, for example, anywhere from maybe 50 to 100 is what your body is happy with most of the time. But as soon as you reach the menopausal age, it's like 0.5 to 1. So it's great decrease in estrogens that are present following menopause. So the big shift is really, really the problem. But if it's a natural process, why does the body react so negatively to it a lot? Why is there weight gain? And you already kind of talked about that with the adrenals. But why are there the other symptoms, estrogen dominant symptoms? Why is it that the body's happy with it for however long, and then all of a sudden, bam, it's not happy with it? Well, as soon as your body is not happy with that number of estrogens, it must detoxify it efficiently. And so to kind of segue into the adrenal dysfunction, what we're going to talk about, what are some super common precursors to adrenal dysfunction? And we talk about this all the time. This comes up in every single episode. Poor hormone detoxification. So if your liver lacks resources to get rid of hormones, you're going to get estrogen dominant symptoms one way or another. It's a rule, in my opinion, that if you do not detoxify hormones properly, you are going to have estrogen dominance unless you have insulin issues, converting things to testosterone, all that stuff. But all of it, whether it's a insulin issue and a testosterone issue, or if it's a estrogen and cortisol issue, both of those originate from blood sugar dysregulation over time and chronic stress over time. So estrogen, cortisol, testosterone, insulin, all of those have very, very, very significant overlap in the pathways that they detoxify through. So if you have chronic adrenal dysfunction throughout the majority of your life, and most women that have issues during menopause have hormone issues for a long time due to this, you're going to get where you can't detoxify this. You're going to get adrenal dysfunction. Now, the precursor to all this stuff is blood sugar dysregulation, leading to too much cortisol production, too much insulin production, lack of resources to then break down not only those hormones, but also testosterone, estrogens, all that stuff. And then from there, whatever estrogens that you have, your body will not get rid of them. And so when that's the case, that's where you get hot flashes. That's where, if you're not menopausal age, that's where you get shorter cycles, longer periods, heavier, more PMSy periods, all that stuff. But during menopause, really, it's the hot flashes, it's the mood swings, it's the weight gain, all that stuff. It's poor energy, it's poor sex drive, it's low exercise tolerance, it's all of those things. And so the goal has to be, well, let's replenish resources to detoxify that stuff. And it's the same whether you're 16 and you have estrogen dominant symptoms and heavy period, all that stuff, or if you're 50 going through menopause. It's estrogen dominance is the same in both avenue, in that you start with detoxification, which means supporting pathways like glutathione conjugation, glucuronidation, sulfation, stuff like that. And I know that probably sounds like gibberish to our listeners, but it's all activated B vitamins. It's antioxidants, it's amino acids, it's things that we should be getting a whole lot through our diet. But in order to dig yourself out of this hole, oftentimes supplementation is very necessary for honestly quite a while, because every single month of your life, at least once you reach a relatively mature age, you have a period and you have a ton of hormones to deal with. So it's not like your body ever gets a break. You have stress on top of that, blood sugar issues on top of that, and it's just this perfect cast of long-term hormone issues. So anyway, that's my rambling on the precursor to adrenal dysfunction, to menopause, all that stuff. But Dr. Joel, do you want to add anything to that, and then get into really what adrenal dysfunction is and how that makes all this worse?
Yeah, totally. So to add to that, so you mentioned overall the long-term stress as a big part of that. So obviously not being able to detox hormones properly. You mentioned the long-term stress. I would say that long-term stress piece is one that we probably elaborated the most in our adrenal episode that we did a little ways back. And I think it's worth just commenting a few things there. So you have kind of different categories of stress, I would argue. And I would probably break them down into like 4 categories. I think this would be the most holistic at its core. So the first category is the mental emotional stress. This is the stress that most people think about, because it's like you have stress from work, you have stress from relationships, stress from life, stages of life you're in, school, all the things. That's the mental emotional. Then you have the chemical stress. This is where you and I, Dr. Tim, often thrive. I would argue the most across our healthcare profession in the functional medicine.
We thrive on having chemical stress.
No. Well, we might, but we thrive on. No, we thrive in helping people with this, as far as getting to the bottom of these things. So, I
was like, I definitely don't thrive in that state. I don't feel well in that state.
Yeah. So with the chemical stress, we're talking about basically things internally that are increasing your cortisol production in your body. And remember that the adrenal glands are your main organ system that's going to support your sympathetic or your fight or flight nervous system. So anything that's going to put your body in like a stressed or survival state is going to tell the adrenals to work harder. Chemically, what does that look like? Well, anything chemically that's going to increase inflammation will usually increase cortisol. So if you're eating processed foods, if you're eating seed oils, if you're drinking water that's full of chemicals and things like that, it's not filtered very well. tap water, fridge water, things like that. If you are getting too much caffeine, if you're getting too many stimulants in your system, that can always increase the cortisol production in your body, and inflammation and so forth. And then, of course, one of the big ones we talk about with like functional medicine are like the root causes, parasite infections, bacterial overgrowth issues, fungus issues, chronic viruses, aldehyde toxicity, mold toxicity, things like that. So metal toxicity. So when we talk about overall your body is more stressed, you have higher cortisol. It can come from the mental emotional places of like just life and work and all that. It can come from the chemical places. It can come from the physical places. If you don't move your body enough and your blood and your lymph is stagnant, that's going to increase cortisol in your body. Movement is very supportive for our system. And then on the other hand, if you work out too much and you don't fuel enough, get enough protein and support, and then you don't recover enough, get enough sleep and so forth, then that can increase cortisol. If you have some kind of injury that's not healing, that can kind of increase the stress and strain on your body, which can increase cortisol. And then, bless you, Dr. Tim. So that's the mental, emotional, the chemical, and then the physical. And then I would say the fourth is actually spiritual. And that's where it gets really interesting. And Dr. Tim, I haven't talked to you about this yet, but I'd love to maybe have an episode on spiritual things, because I think that could be really fascinating, really interesting. But the spiritual thing. So that goes into a lot of spiritual, I'll save a lot of details here, but it goes into spiritual warfare. And as a Christian, there's a lot there that we can talk about. And then, not to mention, if you don't have peace spiritually with God, I would argue that's going to naturally increase stress and so forth, because that's going to lead to other root issues, or that's going to be a root issue that leads to like anxiety and things like that, because you're not coming from a place of peace and trusting in God and things like that. So I don't want to necessarily open that can here, but we will another time. So that's stress. So many things will increase stress and cortisol in our body. That's going to increase the demand of the adrenal glands and can run our adrenal glands down and make them just exhausted over time. We talked about the different stages of adrenal fatigue and so forth. I don't think we really need to jump into that for sake of time today. That's more going to be, again, some additional stuff from our adrenal episode. But then the next step, I think here, Dr. Tim, is okay. How do we support the hormones? How do we support the adrenal glands so that even as you're going through menopause, you don't really have symptoms? And I agree with you, Dr. Tim. I think you mentioned this a second ago, or at least hinted at it, that we, as women go through menopause, you shouldn't have these symptoms. You shouldn't have these things, because yes, your hormones drop, but it shouldn't drop too much. But it should drop in a way that not only are your hormones lowering, but your body is actually changing in a way that it's ready for that. And when your hormones drop, but your body's not ready for it, or if your hormones drop too much, that's when women have these symptoms. So you should be able to enter into menopause without all of these symptoms. You should feel normal. It should be part of the normal aging process. And you should still have good energy. You should still have a balanced mood. You should still have good libido and things like that. And you shouldn't have all these crazy symptoms. So, Dr. Tim, anything else to add to that came to mind? And then we'll jump into here eventually into what we can do to support the adrenals and thus support the hormones.
Yeah, one last thing that I'll add is, so we've kind of talked about physical, emotional, chemical, drivers of stress, all that stuff. But I guess the step-by-step process that happens throughout your life, think about it. I mean, how many people know, or at least knew back when you were in high school, or of that age, how many girls go to school and they've always got stomach issues because they don't eat. They're showing up to school, drinking a coffee and just eating maybe some French fries or mac and cheese at lunch. And then from there, they don't eat anything till dinner, and then they just nibble and then go to bed. Well, there's all kinds of rampant anxiety. There's all kinds of hormone issues that come with that. There's all kinds of issues. We need to fuel our bodies properly in order to have sufficient hormones, reduce cortisol, all that stuff. So with the chemical drivers of stress and the blood sugar issues, that's something that starts right off the bat. That's a super common thing. Almost every single time that I have a girl that's, within the first, couple years of getting her period that comes into the office, diet is always just awful, just terrible. But then you fast forward and then you get into college and then, you get your degree, you go to work and all that stuff. And then you've got all this stress from work, maybe, get married, have a kid, all that stuff. And then you've got all this stress where you're not sleeping, you're having to, supply food for another human being, and still not fueling your body like you should. Well, if you're lucky enough at that point to be able to get pregnant, given all the hormone issues that are already there, it's a miracle that even happens. But each pregnancy that you have and each kid that you have, you're depleting your body of those resources more and more and more and more. And very oftentimes what we will hear is, my third pregnancy, I just fell apart. My second pregnancy, I just fell apart. It's almost never the first one, but every now and then it can be if you have significant hormone issues prior to it. But it's always, I fell apart after this pregnancy. And then once you have that, and then your mom taking care of all these children, you've got to coordinate schedule, cart kids around, do all this stuff. And I'm sorry if that sounds like I'm, affirming gender roles and sexist and all that stuff, but I mean, that's just how it goes. Almost every single young woman that comes into my office that has small kids, she's the one coordinating schedule. She's the one, basically running the household stuff while the husband works and gets all that stuff done. But it's stress in regards to putting others before yourself, not eating properly, not getting proper sleep because you're just trying to get through each day taking care of kids, and then have that going on until the kids are old enough, get out of the house. And then once that's the time frame, that's when the menopausal symptoms start kicking in. That's where you get later 40s, early 50s, and things start falling apart in that regard, where your body starts to decrease that follicle stimulating hormone. And throughout that entire process, it doesn't ever seem like there's a break where you can take the time to allow the adrenals to heal if you don't know what causes them to be a problem in the first place. And it's not even a thought. It's like the entire upbringing and, from a young age, societal pressures of young girls to, be skinny and not eat too much food and, all the bullying that happens in schools to kind of push you to that point. But then from there, the hormonal stuff that goes along with sexual maturity, reproduction, all that stuff, and then taking care of a family, it's just on top of that, having your period every single month. All that stuff compiled together drives your adrenals into the ground unless you explicitly take care of yourself. I always joke around with my women that come in as patients that have these problems, in that I'm incredibly thankful that I don't have to deal with this stuff as far as it goes for me personally. I have to deal with my wife who every now and then has some issues around her cycle and things like that, where, she may get hangry or, a little emotional or things like that. But I mean, all things considered, it's totally fine. But it's a lifetime of things stacked against you in regards to not having these problems. And so us talking about these practical next steps and how to fix it, it doesn't matter if you're 16, it doesn't matter if you're 20, it doesn't matter if you're 30, it doesn't matter if you're 50. All of these things that we'll talk about not only will help you during menopause, but they'll help you if you're a new mom who's trying to get back after your second pregnancy. They'll help you if you are a 16, 18, 20-year-old, girl who is just getting used to working through this stuff and making sure that you're healthy to then have kids down the road, all that stuff. So healing the adrenals and getting this lined up not only is helpful for mitigating menopausal symptoms, it's also just healthy and good to regulate your cycle as a whole and regulate your hormones as a whole. So in that way, as life goes on and later on, you'll hopefully go through menopause and it will be, for the most part, smooth. So anyway, I think we've beaten a dead horse with all that stuff. But how do we fix this stuff? How do we fix this stuff? So first things first, I'm always huge on the blood sugar stuff. We need to make sure that you are fueling your body properly and mitigating hormone production to regulate blood sugar, and mitigating unnecessary resource expenditure where you could then use it otherwise for good hormone detoxification, good hormone production, all of that stuff. And, it's kind of like when, poor economic times happen and all these companies go, okay, well, we've got too many employees. Well, let's start doing layoffs, make things more efficient. So then that way there's not any waste anywhere and we can at least thrive in what circumstances we have. And it's the same kind of thing with your body. You need to make sure that you are not, you don't have too many workers demanding resources. And make sure that your body has those resources to use for necessary things. If there's unnecessary processes that your body has to go through that deplete resources that you could otherwise avoid through diet or exercise or things like that, do not do that. I get life gets in the way, but if you want to truly be healthy in the long run and avoid this stuff later on in life, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. Dr. Joel, do you want to walk us through your thoughts and how exactly we can fix all this stuff?
Yep. So yeah, like you said, and supporting healthy, balanced blood sugar is huge. A great place to start. So number one is making sure you're getting 3 meals a day with protein being your primary thing there. Remember not to overdo it with the carbs as well. So usually having good amounts of protein, depending on the weight. I know there's different suggestions and so forth, but what I find is most women need around 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. So that's going to lead to roughly the average being about 75 grams per day, but anywhere from 60 to 90, 60 to 100 is an adequate amount of protein. When you eat a meal and you go a couple hours and you get hungry, that's a sign that you didn't eat enough protein. And that's the simplest way to look back and understand if you're getting enough protein or not. So if you need to eat 30, 35, 40 grams of protein in order to feel full for 4 to 5 hours, then you probably need to eat that with every meal. So listen to your body. So getting enough protein, 3 meals a day, no snacking in between. When we snack, it spikes up our blood sugar and then it drops down and it doesn't let our gut actually process our food before and cleanse afterwards. So we want to eat, give our body time, roughly 4 to 5 hours until our next meal. And then we want to eat some more protein as well as other foods, of course. So I would say protein's huge. I would say from a very foundational level, good hydration is key. What do I mean by good hydration? I mean drinking enough water, but I also mean getting enough electrolytes in. Now, the best source of electrolytes that I've found is salt. Specifically a brand like a good pink Himalayan, Redmond salt, or Celtic salt. I've found those to all be really good quality salts. I find that most people need around half a teaspoon a day. If you measure that out, that's a decent amount of salt. You definitely want to put more on your food, but putting it in some water and drinking it is also a great idea. But I find people that are really struggling, or if they really crave salty things, sometimes they need like a teaspoon of salt a day for like 2-3 months to strengthen their adrenal glands up from the electrolytes and minerals in the salt. A teaspoon a day is a lot. Occasionally I'll find someone needs more like 1.5 teaspoons a day, but usually 1 teaspoon is great. You can split it up into doing half in the morning, half in the evening, or you can do it all at once, where you just put it in a few ounces of water and you kind of stir it and basically shoot it back. And it's going to feel like you're swallowing the ocean for about 3 seconds, but you're going to feel really, really good over the course of even just a few days. You're going to feel more hydrated, maybe a little bit better energy and stamina, things like that. So protein, electrolytes from good salt. By the way, there's a lot of electrolyte drink mixes out there. What I've found is the best ones, the base nutrients in that is literally just sea salt. So it's like, essentially they just took salt, added some flavor, and then now they've got a product, which is great, but it's like, it's just salt. The salt's the key thing there. So good protein. Of course, we're big. Yeah, honestly. So protein, we're big fans of animal-based protein. Of course, it's going to be the most bioavailable amino acids that your body's going to be able to use. And then good hydration. As far as water intake, I usually recommend, I would say for whatever your body weight is, I would say at least half of that in ounces. So if you weigh 150 pounds, at least 75 ounces of water a day, I think is a great place to start. But you can always test that too by looking at the color of your urine. If your urine is more dark, that means you're dehydrated, you need more water. If it's really clear, that means you're doing great, you're getting a ton of water in. So good salt, It's going to help you. And by the way, Dr. Tim, a lot of people say, oh, well, salt, isn't that going to increase your blood pressure and be bad for your heart? And it's like, well, think about this. Most of the time when people get something that's high in sodium, it's usually from fast food or some kind of junk food. So what I kind of ask people is like, why don't we wonder about how that's impacting our blood sugar or our blood pressure and how that's impacting the inflammation, all the trans fats, the seed oils, and the processed junk in all these foods. And people blame the salt. But I will say this, a lot of the times when people are getting that salt and it's increasing, or salt from whatever junk food, and it's increasing their blood pressure, a lot of times it's not a good quality salt. It's not a good quality salt that actually has a lot of different minerals and things like that. The general table salt is not good salt. So you want to get a good salt. Like I said, Pink Himalayan, Redmond's, and Celtic are some of my favorite brands. And then, the other thing with salt and electrolytes is, if you think about it, what do most people know that they're for? Most people know that electrolytes and salt is for your muscles. Well, what is the biggest muscle in your chest? It's your heart. And so we need good salt. We need good salt for our heart, for our cardiovascular system, and for hydration of our tissues, and for our adrenals, of course. Outside of that, make sure you're moving, make sure you're walking a lot. 30 minutes to an hour and a half a day is an amazing place to be. Make sure you're maybe working out a couple times a week, getting the heart rate up, whether you're running or lifting or playing a game, whatever you like to do that you enjoy. And then outside of that, I would say, if things are really, really bad, you may consider doing bioidentical hormones temporarily, understanding that this is a complete Band-Aid. It's going to help you feel better for the time being, but you've got to work on strengthening the adrenals and helping improve your health overall in order to actually get good health. And not constantly be reliant on the hormones. So a lot of times women come in, they're on hormones, and when I test them, they don't always test as having some kind of toxicity with them, simply because their body's actually needing it. And so I don't take them off or they'll feel terrible, or I don't recommend they go off or they'll feel terrible. But we basically just support the body underneath, and then their body strengthens, and then they eventually don't need the hormones. So, and then the last thing I'll mention is all the different root causes we talked about of stress and things that drive your adrenal glands and drive the sympathetics. We want to address those. So if you have chronic gut issues, you might have bacterial overgrowth, you might have a fungal overgrowth, you might have parasites. Like, you need to address that. If you have, any kind of different internal issues, constipation, you have chronic headaches, you have some kind of pain in your body, that is likely increasing some kind of inflammation, and that's going to increase some kind of cortisol and stress response. So in general, you just want to increase your overall health and address those different causes. So of course that can get really complex, and that's where people like Dr. Tim and I jump in with patients during our appointments and figure all that stuff out for them. So Dr. Tim, I would say that's kind of my brief thing. I didn't really mention adaptogenic herbs can be helpful as well for the adrenals. And things like that. But Dr. Tim, do you have anything else? I mentioned the protein, the electrolytes. I mentioned addressing a lot of the root causes that drive stress and drive the adrenals. You don't want to get too much caffeine because that stresses your adrenals. Anything else you would mention? I know I've kind of hit a lot of them here.
You basically covered it all. I was waiting for the adaptogenic herb line because that was the one thing that I was going to add.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So adaptogenic herbs are herbs that are in a family that they all have the same function of when adrenals are too low, they help bring them up. They're too high, they help bring them down. So they're very good at leveling you out as far as it goes for sympathetic dominance, autonomic nervous system tone, all that stuff. It helps regulate stress as a whole. If stress is too low, it brings it up. Too high, brings it down. So if you wake up in the morning and you're just super gassed, super tired, can't go to bed, irritable, you name it, adaptogenic herbs can be great for that. Afternoon crashes can be great for that. Can't sleep at night can be great for that. Now, these are all signs of adrenal dysfunction, and maybe figuring out, fixing blood sugar, caffeine, taking some nutrients to help detoxify caffeine and hormones. Great ideas. Increasing electrolyte consumption, all that stuff. Those are all on the list. Dealing with inflammatory drivers that are contributing to adrenal dysfunction. all on the list. But adaptogenic herbs can be really good as a Band-Aid or as a solution to help expedite the process of healing the adrenals. Because within how we do things in the office using the systems healthcare technique, I will often see that, say somebody has a hormone detox issue that is the problem. Well, if hormone detox issue and they show up as needing, say, like vitamin B6 or B12 or B9 or some sort of nutrient that supports a hormone detox pathway, that their body is lacking nutrients to accomplish the detoxification. That does not tell me that their nervous system is imbalanced and just needs support to regulate that. Now, if somebody, I go through and I check and see, if they've got issues with cortisol, estrogens, testosterone, you name it, caffeine, whatever, and the nutrients that are testing are not for hormone detoxification, they're more so adaptogenic herbs, or say that's the nutrient that fixes the problem within the testing that we do. That then alludes to me that maybe their body has resources to do the job. You just need support in forcibly regulating the nervous system. And so rhodiola root is excellent for this. If you already have nutrients to detoxify stress hormones and cortisol and estrogens and all that stuff, and you still feel like your adrenals are off, this one's awesome for that. If you feel super tired in the morning and you're doing all the things right, eating right, sleeping right, doing all that stuff, rhodiola can be great. Ashwagandha can be great. Holy basil, ginseng, albizia, all of those things are on the list of adaptogenic herbs that are super helpful for all this stuff. And so anytime that you feel that your energy levels or your stress levels are off, it can be helpful to regulate that. However, if you are not eating right and you haven't already done things to help detoxify hormones that are undoubtedly contributing to this sympathetic dominance, you probably are only going to be doing Band-Aid and won't fix problems. However, if you've gone down the road of detoxifying things and giving your body nutrients to clear things out, that's when it's much more beneficial to do adaptogenic herbs, because that's where the nervous system and the adrenals just need support. If you lack resources to do work in the first place and you need to replenish those, adaptogenic herbs and other herbs that are helpful for the adrenals or other adrenal support things like trophin or adrenal glandulars, they're not going to be as helpful because the things that are irritating the adrenals are more of the primary issue as opposed to adrenal dysfunction itself. The adrenals are typically a secondary problem. And so you need to deal with the primary drivers of that dysfunction in the first place. So anyway, with healing the adrenals, that is where you are then able to produce estrogens and sex hormones effectively through them instead of just the ovaries. If you handle detoxification of sex hormones, give your body the resources to do so, and then you start eating right, regulating blood sugar, exercising, all that stuff, menopausal symptoms should go away. But you got to think of what are the things that can deplete your resources to get rid of hormones on your own. And that's caffeine, that's sugar, that's poor sleep, that's maybe you've got food sensitivities, maybe you've got inflammation. All of those things are on that list. And so every single patient that we see is completely different. There's things that we'll see quite a bit, but that doesn't mean that the nutrients that we give them are always the same. Everybody's got their own combo of things that are going on. Everybody's got their own, unique mix of things that we must work through and address. But at the end of the day, if you manage blood sugar to mitigate both cortisol and insulin to regulate it, start breaking those things down by maybe using a methylated B complex, along with maybe some glutathione, some artichoke. Right there, if you take those three things, methylated B complex, glutathione, and artichoke extract, you're going to hit all of your hormone detox pathways. And as long as you're regulating blood sugar along with that, doing the 3 meals a day, 5 or so hours apart, plenty of protein and fat, the blood sugar stuff's going to be a whole lot better. If you do that for a while and then you're still not feeling excellent, well, that could mean that you need to incorporate maybe adaptogenic herbs. That could be that you need to maybe do some sort of ovarian glandular supplement to encourage hormone production in the adrenals. Maybe you need to do something like chase tree or vitex berry, wild yam, different herbs that help your body facilitate that process. Because this is a problem that I wish I had excellent answers to very quickly with every single patient. But some people, you deal with the underlying adrenal dysfunction, and then bam, their body does excellent and they start producing hormones well. Other people, you get rid of all that stuff, you detox detoxify, regulate blood sugar, basically prime the body as best as you possibly can to start making hormones, and they still struggle to make them. And that's what you need to do other things to facilitate that process of bringing hormone production back up. That's why we call it a trial of care. You just need to try things, see how it goes, and then if things are not going how you want them to, move on to the next step and pivot and add something else, take something out, do things a little bit differently to problem solve and figure out what you have to do. Because everybody's different. So anyway, Dr. Joel, is there anything else that you think is important to add regarding menopause and how we go about fixing this problem?
I think we've got this covered. I think we've got it covered. I think that this has been super helpful at coming at it from different angles, trying to provide like an overview, and then also trying to get down into the weeds and into the details. So I think we should wrap up here, especially time permitting. We've got to run, both of us do, and get going with our day. For our listeners, if you guys have any questions, please reach out to us. If you have any topics you'd like for us to discuss, definitely feel free to share. We're coming every week with a new episode being released Monday mornings at 5 a.m. And our hope is that these episodes will help you gain knowledge and understanding as to what's happening in your body and how you can be healthier and healthier. Again, my name's Dr. Joel Miller. The practice here is called Freedom Health and Wellness in the Flower Mound, Texas area. If you guys have any questions or want to get in contact, you can find me online at drjoelmiller.com. The office number's on there. You can text us or give us a call. And you can also find me on Instagram and just search up Dr. Joel Miller. And I'm not on there too often, but I'll find your message eventually. All right, Dr. Tim, how about yourself?
So I'm Dr. Tim Augustiniak down here in Bentonville, Arkansas. If you want to find me online, my website is draugustiniak.com. It's draugustiniak.com. On there, we have links to all the socials, all the contact info for the office. And like Dr. Joel said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to reach out and let us know. But apologies for no episode last week. We say we always have time for it, but every now and then we just don't. We just can't coordinate. And so we try to do episodes every week. We'll see what comes up next week, but 85, that's a great number. We're pushing to get 100 here pretty soon. So keep sticking around, tuning in. Thank you for listening to this one, and we will look forward to hearing from you guys and having you listen to the next one.